Good morning from a cold and overcast Johannesburg during Christmas time. Welcome to our viewers. Today we are going to talk about 5 traits of toxic or unhealthy relationships. And if you would like to receive further relationship advice or input on femininity in order to assist our ladies to cultivate healthy relationships in their life, please click the subscribe button and follow our website as well, where we have a monthly newsletter. What is a toxic relationship? Is there a definition? Well, Dr. Lillian Glass, a relationship expert, has attempted to define a toxic relationship as follows. Any relationship between people who don't support each other, where there's conflict, one seeks to undermine the other, where there's competition, disrespect, and a lack of cohesion. Does the Bible deal with unhealthy relationships? I would say it definitely does. I would say that there are a number of relationships biblically that were highly toxic. For example, Samson and Delilah, can't imagine a better example. And even Solomon with some 700 wives and concubines. And if one reads the book of Ecclesiastes, one will see that it is definitely a study in depression and cynicism right at the end of Solomon's life. This was a man who knew many women and yet never seemed to find love. But there are specific texts as well which we could look at, including Amos 3 verse 3. Can two walk together unless they are agreed? Are you compatible with a partner? And then Proverbs 22 verse 3, which is that a wise and prudent person who sees danger flees. And that is pretty much the premise of Art of Feminine as well, in terms of one of our core mandates, which is to equip women to understand what an unhealthy relationship is, so that they are able to recognize certain signs from the outset of a relationship and to cut their losses when they can. And if they are in the vortex of an unhealthy relationship, that they would find the support structure that they need in order to deal with it and to be safe and heard and seen by a community of women in that context. What are the 5 indicators of an unhealthy relationship? There are many more, but today we are only going to look at 5. The first is that inevitably these relationships are cyclical. In other words, the relationship itself is cyclical. It's on again, off again, on again, off again. Invariably what you find with the pattern of unhealthy relationships is that people break up, they get back together again, they break up, they get back together again. But within the sphere and the prism of their relationship itself, there is a pattern, a cyclical pattern of toxicity. And that generally has about 4 stages. The first is when things are going pretty well. There's a build up to a trigger event. There is an explosive event. And there's a make-up period. And after that make-up period, there's peace again. And that's pretty much their cycle, which leaves them feeling depleted, unloved, unheard. And there are also physical consequences for that in terms of an escalation of stress, which is built up over a long period of time. But what that pattern also establishes is what we call, in relationship spheres, including litigation, it establishes what we call a trauma bond. In other words, what's joining those 2 people together is the trauma itself. It's almost addictive. And that is why what we see in domestic violence court is that by and large, abused people invariably go back to an abuser, because they have to deal with the fact that they are bonded with their abuser in a very unhealthy and toxic way. The second trait, control. Domination, manipulation, and essentially control. And there are various degrees of this that I have seen, particularly amongst women. For example, if a man says, "Where are you? Who are you with?" And I've seen extreme cases where women haven't even been able to go and have a cup of coffee with a friend because the men in their lives have become so jealous and so controlling that they have completely and utterly lost any kind of outside life. And what that inevitably leads to is a corrosion of that person's identity in terms of friends and friendships and even family relationships. Invariably what happens is that that person becomes more and more and more isolated in an abusive relationship. And that also sees an increase in humiliation because it leads to a loss of identity. Invariably what I see, particularly amongst women who are in very abusive relationships, is that they lack self-confidence. They lack the self-confidence to leave, and they lack the self-confidence to believe in themselves, to start anew and to move on. Third trait, dishonesty. And this can present itself in a myriad of different ways, because essentially what happens is that one or both of the partners doesn't feel safe, and they invariably don't feel safe emotionally. So they have this big need inside of themselves which needs to be filled elsewhere. And that can inevitably lead to something like a sexual infidelity or a situation where you're looking outside the sphere of the relationship for emotional security and comfort. Fourth trait, disrespect. And this, I would say, is probably the biggest factor with any kind of unhealthy relationship. When you treat your partner worse than you would a complete stranger or your business colleagues or your boss, somehow this person has lost value in your eyes. And inevitably what disrespect leads to is contempt. And there is no going back from a relationship marred with contempt. I would say that it is by far the biggest factor that we see in divorce court. And what is contempt? It's looking at a person and thinking, you have absolutely no value. You are utterly worthless. And once that sets into a relationship, it is fundamentally impossible to save. Fifth trait, abuse. What is abuse? It can be psychological, emotional, physical, sexual. And invariably, that does not necessarily mean grandiose physical acts of violence. Sometimes abuse presents itself in what we call microaggressions, ongoing conflict, ongoing put-downs, and being sarcastic and undermining the other person's opinion, or never even seeking the other person's opinion. What are the side effects of unhealthy or toxic relationships? There are numerous studies which evidence that being in an unhealthy relationship actually has profound health impacts for the people involved. It leads to increased stress and inevitably health consequences linked with that stress, such as heart disease as well as mental illness. In fact, studies have shown that it is far better to be single than to be in a relationship which is unhealthy and toxic. It's better for you psychologically, mentally, and emotionally. So I would ask our ladies that if any of you need any help in this regard, or if you want to know more with regards to unhealthy and toxic relationships, please feel free to contact us on our website and the links below in this video. Thank you.